We've added materials to our model. Now let's add a simple rectangular frame section. And let's create a new code module called Section Creation. Then, let's copy one of our other macros to it. We'll rename our macro to Create Default Rectangular Frame Section. Let's add a new worksheet and a new button. Then, we'll assign our newly created default rectangular macro to it instead of creating a new one. The only real thing we'll switch here is, besides the messages, the function that's being called. You might be sensing a theme here. To add a frame section, let's find the corresponding function in the SAP 2000 API. Let's go to API Functions, Definitions, Properties, Frame. Here, we'll find the SetRectangle function. We can see that it takes 7 parameters, but we only need to provide the first 4. As usual, we have a name, a material property name, a depth, and a width. So, let's call our new section Concrete Section. And, to make use of our previously added concrete material, let's assign it to our new section. Let's also give it 0.2 meters of depth and 0.1 meters of length. One thing to note is that, if you're using commas as a decimal separator in Excel, you'll still need to use dots in code when dealing with fractional values. Programming languages all use dots as the standard decimal separator since they're written in English. That should be it. Let's test it. Let's check SAP 2000 and make sure it was added successfully. And there it is. Now, let's add a custom pipe frame section, but this time, let's add the input data from another sheet. We'll add another button and a new macro called Create Custom Pipe Frame Section. This macro will be quite similar to our previous one. Again, the only real difference between these is the function that's called when adding a section. Let's look at the SAP 2000 API. The function we'll use is quite close to the previous one. Just above the SetRectangle function, we can find the SetPipe function. Clicking on it, we can see much of the same as with the SetRectangle function. We'll need 4 parameters, 2 of which are the exact same as before, and then the outside diameter and the wall thickness. Let's then add a place in our data worksheet for these. Now, let's call our section Pipe 1, and let's make it out of steel. For that, we can go to our Materials menu in SAP 2000. Here, we can see that we have the steel material that we previously created. So, let's use that. We'll also give our section 10 centimeters in diameter, so 0.1 meters, and 2 centimeters of thickness, so 0.02 meters. This doesn't have to be realistic as it's just an example. Now, all that's left to do is to get this information and input it into our function. We've already learned how to do this. We'll change the function to SetPipe. Then, we'll write worksheets, then data, and then we'll access the data cells. For the section name, it's 4C. For the material name, it's 5C. And so on. Done. Let's test our code. Everything seems to be working fine. Let's just check SAP 2000 to see if we can find our new frame section. There we have it. Okay, just one final example to round everything out. We'll be adding a macro to create a new area shell section. For that, we'll look at the API and go into API Functions, Definitions, Properties, Area. Here, we'll see the setShell1 function. Admittedly, it's not a great name for a function, and it's a newer version of the setShell function. The older one is now deprecated and should not be used as it won't be supported in the future. Anyway, we can see the setShell function has more parameters than the ones we used previously. This time we'll need 7 in total. So, let's make some room for it in our data worksheet. Let's call our area shell section Custom Shell Section. It's going to be a thin shell section, and we're going to set drilling degrees of freedom to true. It's important to note that, at this time, drilling degrees of freedom, while already being implemented in the SAP 2000 API, does not yet have any effect on the model itself for now. By the time you're watching this, it might have already been made functional. Okay, let's set our custom material as the material property of this shell section. Then we'll put the material angle at 0, give it 25 centimeters of bending and thickness. All we're missing now is to parse the shell type into an enumeration. Like we did previously, let's add support for a thin and a thick shell section. As always, we could add support for all shell types, but that would just make this example longer. Now, much the same as we did previously, let's go get this data and input them into our function. As you can see, this is one of the limitations of VBA. Most serious programming languages offer a way of breaking up lines of code so that they don't get too long. Since VBA is made for simpler programming and doesn't have any line break characters, sometimes lines can, inevitably, get very long. We could also cut down our line length by saving the worksheet into a shorter named variable or input the cell values into variables as well, but that would also just complicate our code in other ways. Well, no use delaying, let's test it out. Great! Let's just confirm everything went okay with SAP 2000. There it is. Our custom area shell section has been added with our specified parameters and our custom concrete material. This concludes this section of our course. You should now have a better understanding of working with different datasheets and adding or altering definitions of materials and sections using the SAP 2000 API. Next, we'll be moving on to adding actual objects to our model and starting work on our final project for this course.